Howdy, anyone. This is an interdimensional mallet devlog, and I am your host, an evil man. Today, we're going to be talking about the 20 Paths VTT project. And what is the 20 Paths VTT? It's a game. It runs the complete set of DC-20 rules that can function either as a multiplayer VTT or as a cooperative, procedurally generated single or multiplayer world that can be infinitely explored and enjoyed. So what are we going to be talking about today with 20 Paths? Well, first we'll kind of lay out who am I and what am I doing here, as this is the first in this particular devlog series. Speaking of, we're going to talk about what is this series, why I'm making it, who it's for, what's going to be in it. And finally, we're going to get down to my favorite part, what exactly is going into 20 Paths, some of the details of the design. So, what, however, is DC-20? For anybody that's coming into this who may not know what it is, it's a brand new TTRPG being built by the Dungeon Coach. It just came off of a highly successful Kickstarter that I am very proud to have backed. They're not affiliated with me, they're just really cool. He actually replied to me personally in his Discord, saying that because this is an orc license thing, all I have to do is put a link below in the description to his page with all the details on the game. Please, go take a look at it. I think it's really cool. I could make a whole video just about how much I love the idea and why I think it's going to be a really cool game. Well, who am I to even be talking about what I'm doing here? Well, first of all, I have a family. I am a husband. I'm a father of two beautiful children that I am very proud to be a father to. I am a corporate software weenie, and I have been for 20 years, so I have a lot of experience doing back-end and front-end software development, though mostly stuff that you don't actually get to see visually. It's called the back end is what it is. And since almost before I can really put a date on it, I have loved studying TTRPG rules. I have followed D&D 20 since BG2 release back in the before times. And when I saw DC-20, I fell in love with the rule set at first sight. As I said before, I could probably put together a whole 20 to 30 minute video just detailing why I love it and why I think it's going to be a really cool game, but that's actually not the purpose of this series. But let's lay out the project roadmap for 20 Paths. So, we're going to start with a virtual tabletop, and we're going to implement it as a web server. And what that means is that you'll be able to spin this thing up, you'll be able to run it on your local computer, you'll be able to run it on a cloud machine, you'll be able to run it somewhere on the internet, and you'll be able to connect to it. Multiple people will be able to connect to it, and it will be responsible for maintaining all the rules, all the different items and characters and all the other things. It'll all be kept in a nice central place. The next step, after we make that back end part of the thing, is the front end part, the visual client, the thing people will actually use, the thing people consider when they actually talk about a game. The visual client will be the thing that people will use to actually play the game. And finally, once that client has been created and is usable, the next thing would be to add procedural generation, something that can create the world dynamically as you play it so that you can just explore it forever. Think of a combination of Minecraft and Baldur's Gate 3. So why not just use an existing VTT? I'm calling this the 20 Paths VTT, and there's probably about a dozen existing ones out there. Well, I've actually looked into that, and there are reasons. First of all, VTTs are not really for single player, and that's something that I really want to make sure that this project supports. It's not built for single player, it's built for multiplayer almost exclusively, and it's primarily built to support the Dungeon Master. It's built to help the Dungeon Master organize maps, keep track of rules and systems, and all the support that a Dungeon Master needs. The players are there sort of at their discretion, and I want this system to actually be built for both. I want 20 Paths to be able to be something that a player can use without having to have a dungeon master specifically. That's what the procedural generation will do. But I also wanted to be able to do the same things that a DM would need to do for a virtual tabletop. And also, the DC20 team already has VTTs covered. That's their whole shtick. That's part of the Kickstarter, is that they actually had the VTTs covered. Also, I want to fully support 3 dimensions. There's almost no tabletops out there that support 3 dimensions. They're all 2-dimensional except for, I think, Tailspire, but Tailspire is really graphics heavy, and it's not really designed for rules. It's almost exclusively movement. So I want to support 3D. And almost none of the virtual tabletops really are about implementing all of the rules. They kind of focus a lot on combat. They focus a lot on, you have to create your own macros a lot of times in order for even those rules to be applied. And I want this to actually implement every single rule in the DC20 rulebook. And finally, procedural generation. Procedural generation, I don't think any of the VTTs support the kind of exposed internals that would allow a procedural generation engine to create the world as you're looking at it. And 20 Paths is something that I really want to have procedural generation with. And so, gonna have to start from scratch. And let's talk about this devlog real quick. Let's talk about why I'm making this. Fundamentally, the reason why I'm doing all of this is because boredom is death and I need a challenge to thrive. Work can be interesting sometimes, but not super interesting all the time. Like I said, I am a corporate code monkey, and that means that I have to do what my bosses tell me to do, not what I think is interesting. And so this project is going to be something that allows me to take on a challenge, to do something difficult and new and interesting. And that's really important to me. But I have very limited time and energy. Through an enormous amount of work, I have managed to carve out approximately 30 minutes a day for me to work on this project. And so I'm going to have to use that time very wisely, and so I could use some motivation. Functionally, I do better when I have deadlines for other people. I'm used to that corporate reporting and making sure that everybody knows what we've been doing and what I've successfully done, and so I'm gonna try to have deadlines that I have to meet as part of this project. It's gonna be kind of important to making sure it keeps moving forward. And so I'm aiming this at DC20ers. I figured the DC20 community might find this kind of interesting, especially as it's going to be kind of a peek into, what software development and some degree game development kind of looks like. And it's going to be based around DC20, so there's going to be a lot of discussion around those rules if I'm going to implement every single one of them. And this video series can also function as a rubber duck. So in programming circles, rubber duck programming is kind of based around you talk to a rubber duck when you can't figure out a problem. And having to make these devlogs is hopefully something that's going to allow me to have that rubber duck, have somebody that I can talk to and maybe get feedback from in comments. If I need help, maybe somebody will be out there listening that can help. So what's going to be in these devlogs? So it's primarily going to be focused on technical details and management. So that's going to be what kind of technology I'm using, the day-to-day management of the project, the actual writing of code, the implementation of the DC20 rules. It's going to be a lot of technical details. So not going to be a lot of pretty pictures to look at, especially for a long time until we get to the visual client part of it, which is going to be a while. And they're going to be various kinds of presentations. Some are going to be kind of presentations like this. Some are going to be screen recordings. Some are going to be maybe demos of the project itself. They're very rarely going to be to this level of fidelity, though. I'm doing this in a single take because I can't edit worth a darn. And even so, this one took me a long time to put together. So it's not going to be like this very often. And very often is about every other week is when I'm going to be planning on uploading a new update. So that's the deadline that I'm going to have set for myself. And now we can get into my favorite portion, the design. So when you start a project like this, one of the most important things to do is to understand the basic abstractions, the basic concepts, the ideas that you're going to be working with, because if you can get these right, it'll make the rest of the project a lot easier. And so, we're going to talk about 3 core concepts that are going to underline the back end of the 20 Paths VTT. You're going to have the world, you're going to have events, you're going to have rules. So, the world has things in it. Our world has things in it. This world is going to have things in it. Everything is probably going to be a thing. Can you think of a thing? It's probably a thing in the world. So your character, that's a thing. That evil enemy goblin, that's also a thing. The item that you're holding in your hand is a thing. The terrain you're standing on, that's a thing. Everything you can think of is a thing. And things have resources. So, your character may have a resource pool of 4 action points. That enemy may have a resource of 3 movement spaces. Your longsword may have a resource which is called a longsword tag that allows something else to identify it as a longsword as opposed to maybe a short sword. Your terrain may have a tag called rough terrain that's going to be able to differentiate it from regular terrain. And you'd think that would be all the things we're going to talk about, but it's not. We've also got your character's melee attack. The attack itself, not the character, but the attack, is a thing. I told you, if you can think of a thing, it's probably a thing. And maybe it has 13 to attack. That's been added due to the fact that you rolled a d20 and you got a 13 on the roll. And so maybe this thing isn't going to be sticking around for very long, but it's important that it's there because that's what you're going to use to attack. And keep in mind here, a thing is going to have more than one resource. You could have action points, movement spaces, and whatever kind of resource, all attached to the same thing, but each resource has a number attached to it. Speaking of attachments, things are attached to other things through links. So our character here, Drogar the Dwarf, he's got a sword in his back pocket because he's wielding his mighty axe right now. And he's got a backpack that he's wearing, and inside of that backpack is a rope. And so we've got all these different things all linked to Drogar. And hey, he's actually also linked to the terrain that he's standing on. And that's how the world knows where he is in the world. Because this terrain has a location and this character is attached to that terrain, and that's how I know where he is. And over there we've got our enemy, and he's not linked to Drogar, our dwarf, directly. He's an evil enemy goblin, and he's got a bomb that he's holding in his hand, and so he's about to throw it. And so everything can be built through links and resources. And so in summary, what does the world do? The world keeps all these things, resources, and links. The world can be asked questions about things and resources. For instance, you can ask, what are all of the things that are linked to Drogar the Dwarf that have the longsword tag? Those are the kinds of questions you can ask the world. What the world does not do, however, is make changes to things. The world knows all about the things, it knows all about the resources and links, and you can ask it, but it doesn't change things. That is reserved for our next entity, events. So, what can an event do? Fundamentally, it changes things. So event can add a thing into the world. It can remove a thing from the world. And once a thing is in the world, it can increase or decrease its resources, or it can add or remove a link to that resource. And this is all done by one event at a time. So if you want to add a melee attack thing into the world, that's one event. And then you want to add 13 to attack to that roll, or that melee attack, that's going to be a separate event. One event, one update at a time. And these events live inside the event stream. So what is the event stream? It is the stream of all events in order, an infinite list of all events in order. Terms and conditions will probably apply about that, as may have to do some optimization because computers aren't really good with an infinite list of everything. So we'll see exactly how big it gets, but in concept, it has all events in order. But it's not just one giant stream, it's actually divided into 3 parts by something called the event index. So the event index points at the current event. The current event is the event that is just about to modify the world. It hasn't modified it yet, but is just about to. Completed events are events which have modified the world, and so the world knows about these changes, but there are also future events. These are events which are going to change the world, but they haven't happened yet. And this index can be rewound. And as you move the event index backwards in time, each event you move out of the completed set is going to undo its changes to the world. So you can rewind the world all the way back to the beginning when nothing has happened yet. And that's important because of our next entity, rules. So rules are what create events. So if you want to add an event to the event stream, some rule is what's going to have to do that. Rules can even remove events. They can only, however, remove future events. If you want to remove an event that's completed, it means you're going to have to rewind the index and remove it, which is the third thing that a rule can do. A rule can decide to rewind the index. So between these 3 things, the rules have complete control over the event stream. So how do rules work? So the first thing that happens is that the event stream gets updated. A new event is added, an event is removed from the future, or the index moves. Say one event is current, it's then moved to the completed as the event index moves. Those sort of things. Every single one of those things, every single one of those changes to the event stream is going to trigger a rule match. Now, a rule match is going to check their conditions. So each rule has a set of conditions, and it's going to look at the event stream, and it's going to look at all of the things in the world, and it's going to say, do I need to do something right now? I'm a rule. Do I need to do something? And once it's determined that it has to do something, it may need to go out and acquire additional data before it can actually insert a new event. Now, the data acquired may come from an additional query against the world. It may come from asking a player what to do next. For instance, if you want to move in a direction, with the direction you want to move, it's going to have to come from a player. So you got to go get that data. Then once you've got that data, you're going to insert an event into the event stream. And so now that the event is in the event stream, well, that's been updated. And so now we're going to go look at our rules and we're going to see, hey, do any of these match? Acquire data, update the stream, forever and ever in an infinite loop of simulating a world. And that actually closes our summary of these little abstractions. And now we're going to give a little quick talk about the future of the 20 Paths VTT. Is this thing ever going to be completed? In all honesty, probably not. I know that the thing I'm picking up is something that Wizards of the Coast, with all of their money and resources, has been working on for years, and they have not succeeded yet. They are trying to do something very similar over there, and they have not finished, and they've been working on it for years. I'm not a fool. Describing a combination of Minecraft plus Baldur's Gate 3 is an insane dream. But it's a dream, and it's also not the point. The point here is to enjoy myself with a challenging project, to enjoy sharing it with people, heck, maybe even getting people to help me if they want to. Because I'm not planning on monetizing this, it's going to be open source, which means that people are going to be able to look at the code, they'll be able to fork the code into their own repos and do all that other open sourcey stuff that all of my programming friends watching out there will understand. And because I'm going to make it open source and I'm not planning on monetizing it, maybe I'll get help and maybe we'll be able to move along a lot faster than I think. And so, what's the next update? It's going to be focusing on what technology we're using. It's going to be probably a screen recording showing all sorts of fun things about the tools I'm using, and yeah, that's what I'm planning on. And for everybody that's actually bothered to listen all the way through to the end, thank you. Throw a like on this video if you think it's a cool idea. Give me a comment telling me how utterly insane I am to think I should even pick this up as a project. Subscribe if you either want to see me climb to the glorious heights or fall into the depths of restarting this project about every 2 weeks. Either way, it's going to be a good time. Follow us to find more interdimensional devlogs. It's been a blast. Talk to you soon.